Liberal billionaire George Soros is spending big in Texas. The Texas Republican caucus is going after some of its own members, and Texas Democrats are doubling down on their support for abortion. I'm Brandon Waltons, and this is The Headline. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this edition of The Headline. We're going to take a look at some of the biggest stories from across Texas this week. The biggest one that we saw was, of course, campaign finance reports coming out. We had campaign finance reports from everybody running for office who's going to be on the ballot in November. Now, this is important because this is the only report we're going to get until about early October or so. And so you get a little bit of insight into exactly who's funding these campaigns, who's supporting who. And a big notable contribution on Beto O'Rourke, the Democrat candidate for governor's campaign finance report, was a striking $1 million donation from George Soros himself. Here to talk about that and a few other stories, we've got our publisher, Michael Quinn Sullivan. Michael, first of all, $1 million, not a small chunk of change. And I think the notable thing here is that, you know, he didn't do it through another organization or through another PAC like often George Soros does, but he actually put it on, you know, exactly from his name. And now people are saying this is going to be a liability for O'Rourke. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's liability from a couple of fronts. Number one, certainly that energizes perhaps some Republicans who had been, well, you know, I'm going to vote for Abbott, but, you know, I'm not excited. Well, having George Soros giving directly to Robert Francis O'Rourke is going to get some folks interested like they had not been previously. Two, I think that this is important, you know, stepping outside of the gubernatorial race and more for what this means in Texas. If Soros was willing to put his own name on a campaign finance report with $1 million, it makes me think that we're going to be seeing an upping from him and his engagement down ballot in Texas. We'd already seen some of the George Soros apparatchiks, you know, some of his, you know, various entities and institutions and affiliated political action committees making donations in district attorney races and things around the state. And look, I think Soros understands maybe better than most that thanks to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, the way you can steal an election now is making sure you've got Democrat district attorneys around the state. Beto O'Rourke is not going to be the governor of Texas, period. I don't care how much money George Soros spends, Beto O'Rourke will not be the governor of Texas. However, that spending, $1 million being spent by Beto O'Rourke's campaign will definitely help some Democrats running for district attorney down ballot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what we've seen so far. A lot of George Soros's plays in Texas have been those Democrat DAs in places like Harris County, you know, those big Democrat-run counties. His own Tides Foundation and some of the other foundations have supported other organizations, Texas Tribune kind of being a notable example there. But really, it seems to all be about the DAs. And I guess the question is, you know, why focus there? Why do you think he's focusing there, not on, say, the legislature? Well, he's focusing there because, very practically, they're the ones who decide whether or not you get away with stealing an election. They're the ones who decide whether or not you get away with stealing a TV. They're the ones who get away with deciding those things with almost no check. And again, that's why I mentioned the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals a moment ago. No, Republican controlled. Every justice on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is a Republican. And yet, they decided to remove election security and election integrity issues from the hands of the Attorney General of Texas. To me, it is mind-numbing that the governor of Texas has not called a special purpose special session sometime this summer, or in the spring, to have brought them in to rectify that situation. Because what this means is that, this 2022 election cycle, the Attorney General of Texas can't be doing what we saw the Attorney General of Texas doing in, the last couple of years, just proactively going after abusers and folks who were, doing ballot harvesting and other things. So now we are counting on the
very liberal district attorney in Harris County, the far left district attorney in Dallas County, and these others to catch the cheating. And look, I think it's great when you've got Palo Pinto County having their elections with full integrity and everyone's doing it right. But that's just a few thousand votes. In Harris County, you're talking millions of votes. You can literally sway national elections if you're cheating in Harris County. And so, having a Democrat DA is very important to George Soros there.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And we'll see if the legislature comes in and maybe fixes some of that. But speaking of the legislature, you have the Texas House Republican Caucus, which is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's the Republicans in the Texas House. Okay. They're the Republican caucus. They have sort of their own group. They have leadership. They have a chair. They have a vice chair, and they hold somewhat regular meetings as a party inside the House. But they're not focusing right now, I guess, on beating O'Rourke or trying to keep hold of the Texas legislature. In fact, what we've seen is that just this week we've seen the Texas House Republican Caucus is preparing to potentially censure 3 of its members because they spent money endorsed essentially against some, liberal Republicans during the primary election. And that's, I guess, what they're focusing on right now.
Yeah. It's so funny whenever grassroots conservatives raise concerns about voting records, behavior, whatever it might be of Republican incumbents, the first thing you hear shouted from the rooftops is, you can't criticize Republicans ahead of the general election. You can't go out and criticize a Republican. The primary's over. You can't be out, taking a hard stand against Republicans because that could hurt us in November. And yet, here's the Republican caucus voting to censure these 3 members for the sin of having supported a more conservative candidate back in the primary. To my knowledge, none of these 3 guys stand accused of, working to undermine, the nominees since the primary.
Sure.
This is all things that happened in the lead up to the primary. Remember, this was a primary in which Governor Greg Abbott, last I checked, he's a Republican. He endorsed against an incumbent Republican House member who then lost. Right?
Yes, Stan Kitzman.
So here you have the House Republican Caucus going after these members, 2 of whom aren't even coming back.
Yeah, and there's 3 members, I should say. You've got Steve Toth, who is the only one who is coming back. But you've got Ben Lamont, who's not returning. His district was sort of combined to another one. He decided to hang it up. And then you've got Jeff Kaysen, who his district was redrawn to be a Democrat district. So he's not coming back either. And so, I guess it seems a little, maybe petty to be doing this right now.
It is petty, except that it's petty with a purpose, because you do have coming in a fairly large class of freshman legislators. And I think what you're seeing here is the Republican caucus kind of doing a little flex and warning them, you better stay on our good side. You better not, say anything bad about any of the other incumbents who want to come after you, which is, of course, the ultimate in irony for me and for those of us who paid attention for the past couple of years, because you had Dennis Bonnen, the former Speaker of the House, who Greg Abbott has now as a surrogate around the state, and then you had Dustin Burrows, who is currently a member of the Texas House, will be returning in 2023 as a member of the Texas House, who in a closed door meeting that I recorded, wanted to give me a list of 10 Republican incumbents to go after, and it's very striking that the Republican caucus said nothing about those things, said nothing about that. In the same way, you've got the Republican caucus of the Texas House doesn't say a word about Republicans who oppose Republican priorities, the Republican platform, but for these 3 guys who committed the ultimate sin of, going against a liberal incumbent in the primary and supporting someone more conservative, or in the case of Steve Toth, is someone who he had been, gave money to someone he'd been friends with for 30 years. I'm pretty sure that Toth would give him money no matter what because they were friends, kind of thing. And anyway, just very weird deal.
I like what Jeff Kaysen said, which was essentially that he didn't know about this rule. A lot of people didn't know about this rule, but if he had known about it, he still would have done it. It wouldn't have really changed his mind. You got another House member, Cole Hefner, who this week at a meeting of the Smith County Republican Party, of which a portion of his district is in Smith County, they were considering a resolution to essentially support what Texas Republicans have already overwhelmingly said they support, which is ending the practice of putting Democrats in leadership positions in the state legislature, okay? Not awarding them committee chairmanships. That resolution passed. It passed the party there. But over the objections of State Representative Cole Hefner, who spoke against it, and I'm told he spoke against it for, well over 30 minutes, telling people that, oh, this is not a good idea. This is what Washington does. Sometimes Austin's not like that. You got to kind of, work together. What do you make of this? This is just the latest example we see from a lawmaker, but that he's far from the only one. This is probably the prevailing view.
The red herring argument is, oh, well, that's what Washington does. We don't want to be like Washington. I would submit to you that's probably the only thing Washington gets right, is the idea of, to the winner go the spoils. The party that the people put in charge, that they get to run things. And when you've got a guy like Cole Hefner says, we have to work together. What he's really meaning is we have to give Democrats power to thwart the wisdom and the wishes of conservative grassroots Texans. And that's what we have witnessed over the past years, have been Democrats being placed in positions by Republicans so that they could make difficult the movement of priority legislation of Republicans. We've got a commanding Republican majority. There's not a reason in the world why every priority of the Republican Party shouldn't be implemented. But it's not because of the Democrats, but because Republicans allowed Republicans like Cole Hefner, like to have Democrats in charge. And that way Cole Hefner can go home at the end of 2023's legislative session and say, oh, we just couldn't get this done because those wily Democrats were able to. No, the Democrats were able to be wily because the Republicans allowed it.
Right. Real quick before you go, just this week, Governor Abbott said this is still a state of disaster for COVID. We're now in our 29th month of a state of disaster, state of emergency, executive orders. Did you ever think that we would go on this long? 2.5 years now.
Look, you had the Republican Party begging the legislature to do something about reining in executive power, and of course they didn't do that. All of them have designs of being their own sort of dictator, I guess, at some point. It was striking to me that Greg Abbott re-upped it kind of in honor of Joe Biden getting COVID, I guess. I don't know. But you walk around the state, you don't see people dashing and cowering in fear from the COVID buzzards flying over. We're kind of past it now. And that the idea, though, that we're continuing to operate under an emergency does a real disservice to why we have emergency declarations. This is now kind of a sick parody of a joke that's being played on the people of Texas, and it has to be fixed.
Yeah, and if you're watching, do you think it's still an emergency? Go ahead and let me know in the comments whether you still think that COVID is an emergency in Texas. Would love to find out what folks think about that. Michael, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Brandon.
Well, earlier this week, Democrats in Congress voted to officially make gay marriage protected under federal law. But it wasn't just Democrats that went along with it. In fact, you had a handful of Republicans, including one Republican from Texas. That's right. U.S. Representative Tony Gonzales voted with Democrats against traditional marriage. Here to talk about that and a couple other issues, we've got the president of the Texas Family Project, Chris Hopper. Chris, thank you so much for joining. And, before the vote even happened, when we saw that Democrats were gearing up to do this, did you think more Republicans would go along with this or less?
I think we were all, and Brandon, thanks for having me, by the way. I think we were all surprised at the 47 individuals with the R next to their name who showed up in stark contrast to what platforms they ran on. I think here in Texas, District 23 should be infuriated at Tony Gonzales. I think he is, of course, just a squishy rhino, and they are the problem. Mm-hmm.
And you hear from a lot of people, right? Some people that say they're Republicans, they'll say, well, this issue doesn't really affect me, right? Is that true?
No, it's one of those issues where it affects everything that it touches, and you can swap the names, you can call it Respect for Marriage Act, but you're simply trying to make a certain group hand over any type of leverage to get good bills passed, and for the sake of a name change. So you can call it, Brandon, Respect for Marriage Act all you want to. I think Defense of Marriage Act was absolutely appropriate. And the fact that we had so many Republicans who showed up in mass number and put a wrench in the gears of progress for the families, I am floored.
Mm-hmm. On a slightly different issue, we're seeing Democrats, especially here in Texas, trying to fight back, trying to find ways to circumvent Texas's abortion laws. You've got some that are reaching out to the Biden administration saying that they need to do something. Others, you've got some cities that are trying to decriminalize abortion in their own little way. First of all, are you surprised to see this? And what does it say about the state of politics right now?
Well, for people in Texas, it should shine a bright spotlight on the fact that these things are happening in the Lone Star State. And to your point, Brandon, they're not only pushing back, they have a roadmap. A detailed roadmap. They want to repeal HB 1280. They want to do this trigger law thing. They want to repeal the 6-week abortion ban. They want to do all these things to absolutely hurt the Texas family. They want to do all of these things that would absolutely harm Texas families and would absolutely cause damage. And again, I'll say it again. I think the families in Texas are listening. They are watching, they are becoming well-versed in all of these different strategies. And there is something brewing in Texas, and it's starting with families who are waking up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the very core of your organization, Texas Family Project, which is launched. Explain for people who may not have heard about it, what exactly y'all are about.
Texas Family Project is an organization whose sole purpose is to support the family in Texas and to highlight some of the things that are happening at the Capitol. For instance, we talked about abortion. We've never allowed parents to kill their children due to parents' decisions, and yet folks are still fighting and pushing for these different angles to get abortion back on the table. And so Texas Family Project, our only purpose is to wake up parents and let them know they are the answer. It's not a well-spoken politician. Parents are the answer. They've got to get involved. They have to take action, and we have to hold these elected officials accountable, and they will get the message.
And for people who want to follow your organization, where can they do that?
Yeah, any of the social media platforms, Family Project TX. Also, our website is texasfamilyproject.com. They can sign the pledge. They can get involved. We're in this together.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining, Chris.
Thanks, Brandon.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in. A reminder, we've got a whole series of shows, programs, podcasts up at texasscorecard.com. You can check those out. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time we go live here at Texas Scorecard. Like I said, we've got a lot of program we love to bring you, and we love it when you share, and we love to bring this to you. So thank you so much for joining us on this Friday edition of The Headline. Have a great weekend.
You made it to the end of this video. You're probably 1 in a million. But since you're here, make sure you go to texasscorecard.com to find more journalism and commentary, all things pertaining to Texas. Make sure you also like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the bell. That way you can be notified when new videos come out. Thanks.